The transport officer's eyes flicked nervously to the containment unit at the far end of Horus Prime's cargo bay. His voice dropped to a whisper. She bit the last 3 passengers. The one before that disappeared entirely. Jax Harrow stared through the reinforced glass at the small figure huddled in the corner. A child, no more than 11 or 12, with matted dark hair that obscured most of her face. Her wrists were bound by neural suppressors, the kind typically reserved for Class 4 biohazards. "What's her designation?" Jax asked, his voice betraying nothing. D9, Failed Biological Unit from YTE Project. The officer shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know you take all sorts of cargo, but she's been rejected from 3 colony transports already. Nobody wants the liability." Jax continued observing the girl. She hadn't moved since he'd arrived, hadn't even looked up. But something about her stillness seemed deliberate rather than defeated. "What's the bounty for safe delivery?" The officer's eyebrows shot up. 8,000 credits. But like I said, "I'll take her." As Jax signed the transfer documents, a medical technician approached the containment unit with a sedative injector. The moment he entered, the girl's head snapped up. Her eyes, startlingly aware, locked onto the technician. He offered platitudes, empty reassurances as he moved closer. "This won't hurt, just standard procedure for transfer." The girl lunged forward with impossible speed. The technician screamed, stumbling back with blood streaming from his hand. Security personnel rushed in, restraining her with electric prods that made her body convulse. But she didn't cry out. Not once. As they dragged her away, Jax noticed another passenger watching, an older woman with analytical eyes. She caught his gaze. "Curious," she said. "That technician told her it wouldn't hurt, but the restraints they use cause nerve damage." He lied. Her eyes narrowed. "That's the pattern, you know. I've been observing. She only attacks the ones who lie to her." Jax filed this information away without comment. He'd seen many things in his years traversing the outer systems. Child soldiers, bioweapons disguised as people, experiments gone wrong. But something about this girl's eyes didn't match any of those categories. They weren't vacant or feral. They were watching. Waiting. Hours later, when station security transferred the containment unit to his ship, Jax noted how the girl tracked everything: the guards' positions, the exit routes, the weapons at their sides. Not with fear, but with cold calculation. "Welcome aboard the Avalon," he said when they were alone, his voice neither kind nor cruel, just factual. "I'm Captain Harrow." The girl remained silent, her gaze now fixed on a point beyond his shoulder. "Maeve, begin departure procedures," Jax called out. The ship's AI responded in a crisp, feminine voice. "Departure sequence initiated. Captain, I must note that our new passenger's biometrics do not align with standard human parameters. Her heart rate is elevated but steady, suggesting a permanent state of fight or flight. Should I prepare medical protocols?" "No," Jax said, turning away from the containment unit. "Just keep the observation systems running. Full spectrum." "Understood, though I question the wisdom of transporting what appears to be a biological weapon, however small." Jax moved toward the cockpit without responding. The girl's eyes followed him until he was out of sight. He should have reported this. YTE was technically a legitimate research organization, but rumors of their failed projects had circulated for years through the fringe systems. Children modified for various purposes, disposed of when they didn't meet specifications. The Interplanetary Coalition maintained willful ignorance, too many powerful interests involved. In the cockpit, Jax pulled up the transfer documents. The destination was a reclamation facility on Era 7, a sterile term for what was essentially a disposal site. Whatever they'd tried to make her into, they'd now deemed her irreparable. Jax closed the file. He had 6 days of travel before reaching the handoff point. 6 days to decide if he was actually going to deliver this cargo. As the Avalon pulled away from Horus Prime, he felt the familiar embrace of deep space, the silence, the distance from humanity's incessant demands. Out here, a person could still make their own choices, even bad ones, especially bad ones. The Avalon's engines hummed a low, familiar melody as the ship slipped into the void between stars. In the solitude of his cockpit, Jax's fingers traced an old, worn photograph tucked beneath the control panel, a smiling girl with his eyes, forever 8 years old. "Approaching jump point," Maeve announced. "Calculations complete. Execute," Jax replied, tucking the photo away. The stars stretched into lines as the Avalon entered slip space. The first night, Jax moved the girl from the containment unit to a small vacant crew quarter. He removed the neural suppressors from her wrists but kept the door sealed. The observation feed showed her exploring the space with methodical precision, testing the strength of the walls, examining the ventilation shaft, studying the door mechanism. Not once did she attempt to sleep. By the second day, she still hadn't touched the food or water he'd left. Jax entered the room with fresh supplies and found her sitting cross-legged in the corner, watching him. "You need to eat," he said, placing a tray on the floor. "I won't force you." He backed away, maintaining eye contact. The girl's gaze was unnerving, too old for her face. As he turned to leave, Maeve's voice came through his earpiece. "Captain, her heart rate elevated when you mentioned forcing her. Previous biometric analysis suggests trauma responses to restraint or coercion." Jax paused at the door. "Nobody's going to force you to do anything on this ship," he clarified. "Your choice." Something flickered across the girl's expression, the barest shift. When Jax checked the observation feed hours later, the tray was empty. On the third day, Jax was repairing a faulty oxygen filter when he cut his hand on a jagged piece of metal. Blood welled from the deep gash as he cursed under his breath. He'd need to close it properly in the medbay. When he turned, the girl was standing in the corridor, watching him. He hadn't heard the door open, hadn't heard her approach. "Go back to your room," he said calmly, pressing his uninjured hand against the wound. She moved closer instead, her eyes fixed on the blood seeping between his fingers. Jax tensed, remembering the warning. She bit the last 3 passengers. But the girl didn't lunge. She reached out slowly, her small hand hovering near his wound. When Jax didn't pull away, she touched her fingertip to the edge of the cut, then placed the bloodied finger in her mouth. Before Jax could react, she bit her own wrist, hard enough to break skin, then pressed her bleeding wound against his. The sensation was immediate, a burning cold that spread from the point of contact up his arm. Jax jerked away, stumbling back. The girl retreated equally fast, disappearing down the corridor toward her room. When Jax examined his hand, the deep cut had already begun to close, the edges knitting together before his eyes. "Maeve," he called out, voice tight with controlled alarm. "What just happened?" "Unknown, Captain. The girl's blood appears to contain regenerative properties. Your wound is healing at 400% above normal human rate." Jax flexed his hand, feeling only the ghost of pain where the gash had been. "Is she human?" "Genetic sequencing indicates human origin, but with significant modifications. Her cellular structure contains engineered organelles not present in baseline humans." "And you didn't think to mention this before?" "You instructed me not to run medical protocols, Captain." Jax swore under his breath. When he checked on the girl through the observation feed, she was huddled in the corner of her room, paler than before. The bite mark on her wrist was still bleeding. "Analyze the blood sample from the maintenance bay," Jax instructed, as he entered the med bay. "What happens to her when she uses this ability?" "Her cellular energy appears severely depleted. The process seems to transfer her regenerative capacity temporarily. Captain, this suggests intentional design, a one-way healing mechanism that benefits the recipient at cost to herself." Jack stood motionless, the implications settling like a weight. She's a medical battery. They engineered a child to be drained. He grabbed a medkit and headed for the girl's room, overriding the lock with his command code. She didn't move as he entered, her small body curled protectively around her injured wrist. "I'm going to help you," he said, crouching a safe distance away. "Your turn to be healed." He placed the med kit on the floor and slid it toward her. The girl watched him with cautious eyes, then slowly reached for the kit. With surprising dexterity, she applied the synthetic skin sealant to her wound. Jax nodded. "Good. Now eat something. You need it." He placed a nutrition bar beside the kit. The girl studied his face, then reached for the food, but instead of eating it, she pushed it back toward him. A trade. "No," Jax said firmly. "That's for you. I didn't earn it." Her eyes narrowed slightly, uncomprehending. "You don't owe me," he clarified. "You don't have to earn food here." Confusion flickered across her face, the first real emotion Jax had seen from her. Slowly, uncertainly, she unwrapped the bar and took a small bite, watching him the entire time as if waiting for the trap. That night, reviewing the ship's logs, Jax discovered something unusual. The life support system had registered the girl leaving her room several times while he slept, moving through the ship with apparent purpose. "Maeve, why didn't you alert me?" "She didn't attempt to access any critical systems, Captain. She appeared to be exploring." The observation footage showed the girl methodically examining the ship, not looking for weaknesses or escape routes, but studying the mechanics, the systems, occasionally touching a panel or tracing a power conduit with surprising recognition. "She understands the ship," Jax murmured. "Better than most engineers I've observed," Maeve agreed. "Her focus suggests technical training." "But there's something else, Captain. When she passed your quarters, she stopped. Stood outside your door for 47 minutes. Jax frowned. "Doing what?" "Listening to you breathe." By the fourth day, Jax had begun an improvised communication attempt. He placed a datapad in the girl's room with simple shapes and colors, curious if she would respond. Hours later, he found the pad wiped clean except for a single, precise drawing, the Avalon's engine configuration, rendered in perfect detail down to the quantum stabilizers. "She doesn't lack intelligence," Maeve observed. "Perhaps she lacks language." Jax shook his head. "No, she understands what I say. She chooses not to speak." He left another pad with a more direct question, a sketch of her face with a question mark beside it, a request for a name. When he checked later, the pad remained untouched. That evening, as Jax prepared for the final jump sequence that would bring them to Eros 7 in 2 days, the proximity alarm blared. A ship had dropped out of slipspace directly in their path, a sleek, government-class vessel with coalition markings. "Incoming transmission," Maeve announced. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced man in a coalition uniform adorned with the insignia of Interplanetary Inspectorate. "Cargo vessel Avalon, this is Inspector Rask. Prepare for boarding and inspection under Section 17 of the Biological Transport Protocols." Jax kept his expression neutral. "Inspector, my manifest is in order. What's this about?" "Routine inspection. We've had reports of unregistered biological cargo moving through this sector." Rask's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing to worry about if you're operating legitimately." The transmission ended before Jax could respond. "He's lying," Jax said quietly. "They don't conduct routine inspections in deep space." "Their weapon systems are powered and targeting," Maeve confirmed. "This is not standard procedure." Jax's mind raced through options. The Coalition had no authority in this sector unless explicitly pursuing contraband or fugitives. They knew about the girl, somehow, and were circumventing proper channels to retrieve her. "Maeve, prepare for emergency jump." "The calculations will take 9 minutes, Captain. Their boarding shuttle has already launched." Jax swore, pushing away from the console. He needed to hide the girl, but where? The Avalon wasn't designed for smuggling. Every space was accounted for in the official schematics. He found her already waiting in the corridor outside the cockpit, her expression alert but calm. "People are coming," Jax explained quickly. "They want to take you back." For the first time, fear flashed across the girl's face. She shook her head violently. "I know. I won't let them." Jax crouched to her level. "But I need you to hide. Can you do that?" The girl nodded once, decisively. "Good." "Follow me." Jax led her to his private quarters, the one place that might buy them a few extra minutes due to privacy protocols. He moved to the wall panel beside his bunk, disengaging the safety locks to reveal a small maintenance shaft. "It's tight, but you'll fit. Stay there until I come for you. Understand?" The girl hesitated, looking from the dark shaft to Jax's face. Then with startling clarity, she spoke, her voice raspy from disuse, the words emerging like broken glass. "Don't let them take me back to Cage." Jax froze, momentarily stunned by her voice. "I won't," he promised. "Now go." She slipped into the shaft with practiced ease. Jax sealed the panel just as the docking alert sounded. Inspector Rask boarded with 4 armed security officers, their hands resting on pulse weapons. His smile remained coldly professional as he surveyed the Avalon's main cabin. Captain Harrow, former Coalition engineer, discharged after the Vega incident. Now running cargo through unregulated space. Rask's eyes gleamed with recognition. "How interesting to find you transporting sensitive materials." "My manifest is standard," Jax replied, keeping his tone even. "Medical supplies, replacement parts for the mining colony on Helios 9. And yet our bioscanners detected something else." Rask produced a small device that emitted a high-pitched signal, something carrying the genetic signature of Project YTE, specifically, designation D9. Jax maintained his neutral expression. "I transport what's on my manifest, nothing more." "Search the ship," Rask ordered his men. "Every compartment, every hidden space." Jax followed as they methodically moved through the Avalon, his heart rate steady despite the growing tension. When they reached his quarters, Rask paused, his scanner pulsing rapidly. "Biological signature detected," he announced, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. "Strong presence within the last hour." One of the security officers moved toward the wall panel. Jax shifted slightly, calculating the odds of overpowering 4 armed men before they could reach the girl. Not good. "Captain," Maeve's voice came through the ship-wide comm. "Emergency jump calculations complete. Executing in 3 minutes." Rask's head snapped up. "Override that jump sequence immediately." "Can't," Jax replied calmly. "Once initiated, the sequence is locked to prevent mid-jump destabilization. Coalition safety protocols." Fury flashed across Rask's face. "Where is designation D9? This is your final warning before I charge you with obstruction and biological terrorism." "Terrorism?" Jax raised an eyebrow. "For transporting a child?" "That child is a failed biological weapon," Rask snapped. "A defective unit that rejected its programming and attacked its handlers. It belongs to YTE, and I am authorized to retrieve it by any means necessary." Jax's expression hardened. "She, not it." Something shifted in Rask's demeanor, a tightening around the eyes, a slight straightening of his posture. His hand moved to his weapon. "You've developed an attachment. Unfortunate, but not unexpected. The unit is designed to elicit protective responses from suitable hosts." His voice turned almost pitying. "It's not real, Captain. Whatever humanity you think you see is an engineered trait to ensure survival until extraction." Before Jax could respond, the wall panel behind Rask exploded outward. The girl launched herself at the inspector with preternatural speed, her teeth finding his exposed wrist. Rask screamed, more in shock than pain, as the security officers raised their weapons. "Don't shoot!" Jax yelled, diving forward. Too late. A pulse blast caught the girl in the shoulder, spinning her away from Rask. She hit the floor hard but immediately rolled to her feet, eyes wild, blood trickling from her mouth. Rask staggered back, clutching his wrist. "Kill it!" he ordered, his composure shattered. Before the officers could fire again, Rask's wrist device began to emit a shrill alarm. He stared at it in horror as the screen flashed red. "Biohazard detection! Explosive!" The device detonated, taking Rask's hand with it. The confined space of the cabin filled with smoke and screams. Jax lunged through the chaos, finding the girl by instinct more than sight. He scooped her up and ran, ducking as pulse fire streaked past his head. "Maeve, vent atmosphere in my quarters, now!" The emergency bulkheads slammed down behind them as the air rushed from the sealed section, neutralizing both the fire and the remaining security officers. In the sudden silence, Jax could hear the girl's ragged breathing against his chest. "Jump sequence initiating," Maeve announced. "Brace for transition." The Avalon shuddered as reality bent around them, stars streaking past the viewports. When the disorientation cleared, they were in an entirely different sector, far from both their original course and Coalition jurisdiction. Jax carried the girl to the medbay, laying her gently on the examination table. The pulse wound on her shoulder had already begun to close, but her skin was ashen, her breathing shallow. "Scan for internal injuries," Jax instructed Maeve as he cleaned the wound. "No critical damage detected," the AI responded. "However, her cellular energy is severely depleted. The regenerative process is consuming her reserves at an alarming rate." "What do we do?" "Her system requires significant caloric intake to replenish. Intravenous nutrition would be most efficient." Jax worked quickly, establishing the IV line with practiced hands. The girl watched him through half-lidded eyes, her body tense despite her weakness. "You're safe," he told her quietly. "We're far away now, but we need a better plan than running." Her eyes closed briefly, exhaustion finally claiming her. It was the first time Jax had seen her sleep. "Where did you take us, Maeve?" "The Reach, abandoned mining sector near the Coalition border, specifically Station 37. Jax's hands stilled. "You brought us to Vega." "It was the optimal destination given our fuel constraints and the need to avoid populated systems," Maeve replied. "The station remains structurally intact despite the incident 5 years ago." The Vega incident. The official report cited mechanical failure, a cascade of system errors in the mining station's core. 17 dead, including Jax's daughter Eva, who had been visiting him during school break. Only Jax and 3 others survived. The unofficial truth. Coalition experimental weapons testing gone wrong, covered up by blaming the station's maintenance chief, him. "Set docking procedures," Jax said, his voice hollow, "and continue monitoring for pursuit." As the Avalon approached the abandoned station, Jax remained beside the sleeping girl. Her color had improved, the IV steadily replenishing what her healing had depleted. Occasionally, her eyes would flutter open, find him still there, then close again. He wondered what Rask had meant about her rejecting programming. What had they tried to make her do? What had she refused? Station 37 loomed before them, a massive structure carved partly into an asteroid, its external lights long dark. As they docked in the main bay, dust swirled in the Avalon's landing lights, undisturbed for years. "Atmospheric integrity holding in central sections," Maeve reported. "Power systems operational at minimal levels. No life signs detected." Jax nodded, memories pressing against the edges of his mind. He'd spent 3 years on this station, back when Eva was still alive, when he still believed in the Coalition's promises of better worlds. The girl stirred on the examination table. Her eyes opened fully, alert despite her ordeal. "We're at a safe place," Jax told her. "A ghost station. We can rest, plan our next move." She sat up carefully, examining her healed shoulder with clinical detachment. Then her gaze shifted to Jax, questioning. "Rask called you D9, he said. Is that your name?" She shook her head emphatically. "Do you have a name? One you chose?" The girl's expression changed, something between confusion and longing. She slid from the table and moved to the datapad on the counter, picking it up with decisive purpose. Her fingers moved across the screen with unexpected precision. When she handed it back to Jax, a single word filled the screen. "Nara." "Nara," Jax repeated. The girl, Nara, nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "All right, Nara." "I'm Jax." He gestured to the ship around them. "And we're both fugitives now." The smile vanished, replaced by something harder. She pointed to the screen, then added another word beneath her name. "Sorry." Jax shook his head. "Don't be. They were coming for you anyway. I just didn't expect the self-destruct on Rask's device. He studied her face. Did you know it would explode? Nara nodded once, her expression grim. You bid him to trigger it, Jax realized. To protect us both. Another nod. Jax exhaled slowly. We need to know what we're dealing with. What they did to you. What they want. He hesitated. Will you let Maeve run a full medical scan? It might help us understand. Nara considered this, then nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. It won't hurt, Jax promised. And you can stop at any time. This time the fear faded slightly. Trust, fragile but present. The comprehensive scan took nearly an hour, with Nara lying perfectly still beneath the medical array. When it finished, Maeve displayed the results on the main screen in the medbay. Subject exhibits extensive genetic modification focused primarily on the immune and endocrine systems, the AI explained. Her blood contains engineered platelets capable of accelerated clotting and tissue regeneration. When transferred to another host via direct contact, these platelets temporarily integrate with the recipient's system. Jax studied the complex diagrams. They made her into a walking medical kit. More specifically, a trauma response unit designed for battlefield application, Maeve continued. The modifications allow for rapid healing of critical injuries at the cost of her own cellular energy. However, there is something unusual in her neurological structure. The display shifted to a brain scan, certain areas highlighted in red. The limbic system shows signs of additional modification, specifically, the areas associated with fear response and aggression. There appears to be an artificial neural pathway connecting emotional stimuli directly to physical response. The biting, Jax murmured. Precisely. It appears to be a programmed defense mechanism triggered by specific emotional states, primarily fear and perceived deception. The bite itself is the delivery system for the regenerative platelets, but the targeting seems to be selective. Nara had been watching the display with intense focus. Now she tapped the screen, then pointed to her own head, shaking it vigorously. You're saying they didn't change your mind? Jax asked. Just your body? She nodded emphatically. Is that why they called you defective? Because you wouldn't do what they wanted? Another nod, her eyes darkening with memories. Jax's jaw tightened. They wanted a weapon that followed orders. Instead, they got a person who made choices. Nara's expression softened slightly at his understanding. She reached for the datapad again, typing quickly, "Heal, not hurt." You were designed to heal, Jax translated, but you chose who to heal. She nodded, then added, bad people equal bite. Good people equal help. You can tell the difference? Nara tapped her temple, then her chest. Instinct and heart. That's why you bit the technician at the station. And Rask. They were lying. Her eyes hardened as she typed, they hurt children. The simple statement hung between them, loaded with unspoken horrors. Jax had heard rumors about YTE, euphemistically called Youth Technical Enhancements, but nothing concrete enough for authorities to act on. They operated primarily in frontier systems, where oversight was minimal. How many like you? He asked quietly. Nara held up 10 fingers, then twice more. 30. All children? She nodded, her expression grave as she typed, others obey. I didn't. Jax felt cold fury building inside him, the kind he'd buried after Eva's death, after the Coalition betrayal, the kind that had driven him to the edges of civilized space. We need evidence, he said finally, proof of what they're doing. The Coalition might look the other way for profit, but if this became public... Nara's expression turned skeptical. She pointed to her own body. Isn't this enough? One child they can explain away, classify as an aberration, a failed experiment. We need more. She considered this, then typed, my neck. Jax frowned, noticing for the first time the thin metal collar partially hidden beneath her shirt collar. It seemed embedded in her skin, the flesh around it scarred from what must have been years of wear. What is it? I hear them. See what they see. A neural link? Jax leaned closer, examining the device without touching it. They can track you through this? Nara shook her head, typing. One way. They speak. I listen. Orders. It's a control mechanism, Jax realized. But if it's one way, they can't use it to find you. She nodded, then touched the collar with obvious distaste. Can't remove. Tried. The scarring around the device told that story clearly enough. Jack studied it with engineer's eyes, noting the sophisticated integration with her nervous system. Maeve, analyze the neural collar. Is there a safe removal method? The device appears fused to the spinal accessory nerve, the AI responded after a brief scan. Direct removal would cause significant trauma. However, the internal circuitry could potentially be neutralized without physical extraction. Nara's eyes widened slightly with hope. I'll need specialized tools, Jax said, thinking aloud. Station 37 was a research outpost before mining operations. The lab might still have equipment we can use. As they prepared to enter the abandoned station, Jax gathered emergency supplies and a basic weapon. Nara watched him with curious intensity, her head tilted slightly. Stay close to me, he instructed. The station should be empty, but we don't take chances. She nodded, then held out her hand expectantly. What? Nara mimed holding something, then pointed to Jax's utility belt where a second light was clipped. You want a flashlight? She nodded decisively. Jax hesitated only briefly before handing it over. The gesture of trust wasn't lost on either of them. The station's main corridor stretched before them as they left the Avalon, a wide, curved passage designed to follow the asteroid's natural formation. Emergency lighting cast weak blue illumination along the floor, barely penetrating the darkness. Jax moved with the cautious familiarity of someone returning to a place they'd rather forget. Each junction, each doorway held memories he'd spent years trying to bury. The research lab is in Section C, he said quietly. This way. Nara followed silently, her footsteps nearly imperceptible. Occasionally, she would pause, head tilted as if listening for something beyond human hearing. Each time, Jax waited until she was ready to continue. They passed the central hub, once the heart of the station, now a tomb of darkened consoles and dust-covered chairs. Jax averted his eyes from the memorial plaque installed near the main view screen. 17 names. Eva's among them. Captain, Maeve's voice came through his communicator. I'm detecting a power surge in Section C. Someone has accessed the main laboratory systems. Jax froze, signaling Nara to stillness. The station's automated? Negative. This is manual activation of specific systems. Someone is there. Impossible. The station had been abandoned for 5 years, officially decommissioned after the accident. No one had reason to be here, unless they'd been followed. Jax drew his weapon, motioning for Nara to stay behind him. They approached the laboratory section with heightened caution, moving from shadow to shadow. Through the reinforced windows, Jax could see lights within, not the dim emergency lighting, but the full brightness of active workstations. A figure moved past the window. Tall, precise movements, wearing what appeared to be Coalition Science Division uniform. Then another figure, similarly dressed. They found us, Jax whispered, pulling back from the window. Nara shook her head emphatically, pointing to the collar at her neck, then making a cutting motion. You're sure they can't track you through it? She nodded with certainty, then gestured toward the lab with obvious recognition. You know this place? Jax asked, surprised. Nara hesitated, then nodded slowly. She pointed to herself, then the lab, making a rocking motion with her arms, like holding a baby. This is where you were born, Jax realized. Or made. Her expression confirmed it, complicated emotions crossing her face. The YTE project maintained a research division here, Maeve supplied through the communicator. Officially terminated after the Vega incident, but the equipment was never removed due to quarantine protocols. The pieces connected in Jax's mind with sickening clarity. The accident that killed his daughter and 16 others hadn't been weapons testing gone wrong. It had been an attempt to cover up whatever the YTE project had been doing here. "They're back to destroy evidence," he murmured. "Or retrieve it." Nara tugged at his sleeve, her expression urgent. She mimicked breaking something around her neck. "The lab has equipment that could disable your collar," Jax understood. "But we'd have to get past them." She nodded, determination hardening her features. Then she held up 3 fingers, followed by 5. A question. "Section 35?" Jax translated, confused. "What's there?" Nara made a flowing motion with her hands, then pointed to the emergency systems panel on the wall. "Water? Hydraulics?" Jax guessed. "Station cooling systems?" She nodded vigorously at the last one, then mimed pushing a button, followed by her hands splaying outward, an explosion. "You want to trigger the cooling system emergency purge," Jax realized. "Create a diversion." Nara grinned, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, momentarily revealing the child beneath the survivor. "Section 35 access is 3 junctions back," Jax said, considering the plan. "If we trigger the purge, it'll flood the lower labs with coolant foam. Emergency protocols will seal off that section, forcing everyone to evacuate through the upper levels." Nara nodded, pointing upward, then toward the lab's secondary entrance, the one they now stood near. "We slip in during the chaos," Jax concluded. "Smart." They backtracked to Section 35, finding the environmental control room exactly as it had been left 5 years ago. Jax accessed the emergency systems with his old override codes, still valid. Apparently no one had bothered to purge them. "Ready?" he asked Nara. "Once I trigger this, we'll have about 3 minutes before the foam reaches the main lab level." She nodded, positioning herself by the door. Jax initiated the emergency purge sequence. Immediately, alarm klaxons blared throughout the station, and red warning lights began to flash. A computerized voice announced, "Warning, coolant system breach detected. Emergency purge initiated. All personnel evacuate lower levels immediately." They moved quickly back toward the laboratory section, hearing distant shouts as the scientists responded to the unexpected crisis. From their position near the secondary entrance, they watched as personnel began streaming from the main lab doors, heading toward the emergency evacuation route. "Now," Jax said, when the last figure disappeared around the corner. They slipped inside the lab, a vast space filled with advanced medical equipment, much of it specialized for genetic manipulation. Preservation tanks lined one wall, their contents mercifully obscured by frost on the glass. Workstations displayed complex data streams, analysis of genetic sequences and neural patterns. "What are we looking for?" Jax asked, scanning the unfamiliar equipment. Nara moved with purpose toward a specific station, a neural mapping console connected to what looked like a modified surgical chair. She pointed to the chair, then to her neck. "That's where they installed it," Jax understood. "So it should have the protocols to deactivate it." She nodded, already beginning to access the system with surprising familiarity. Her small fingers moved across the interface with practiced ease, navigating complex security protocols. "You know how to use this," Jax observed, watching her work. Nara nodded without looking up, her concentration absolute. After several tense minutes, she stepped back from the console and pointed to a sequence displayed on the screen, a deactivation protocol. "Maeve," Jax called through his communicator, "can you verify this sequence? Will it safely deactivate the neural collar?" "Analyzing," the AI responded. "The sequence appears designed to sever the neural connection without physical removal. However, it requires direct interface with the device." Nara pointed to a slender probe connected to the console. "The inhibitor probe," Maeve confirmed. "Correct. However, I must warn you, the process will cause temporary but significant pain as the neural pathways are disrupted." Jax looked at Nara. "Are you sure about this?" Her expression was resolute as she settled into the chair, tilting her head to expose the collar fully. "All right," Jax said, taking the probe. "Tell me what to do, Maeve." Under the AI's guidance, Jax carefully positioned the probe against a specific point on the collar. "This will hurt," he warned Nara. "But I'll be quick." She gave him a single nod, her eyes fixed on his, unwavering trust in her gaze. Jax initiated the sequence. The moment the probe activated, Nara's body went rigid, her back arching in silent agony. The collar emitted a high-pitched whine, then a series of sparks as its internal components shut down. When the sequence completed, Nara slumped in the chair, breathing heavily. The collar remained physically attached, but its indicator lights had gone dark. "Neural connection severed," Maeve confirmed. "The device is inert." Nara raised a trembling hand to her neck, touching the dead collar with a mixture of disbelief and triumph. Her eyes, when they met Jax's, shone with something new: freedom. The moment was interrupted by a computerized alert. "Warning: unauthorized access to Project Sentinel files detected. Security protocols engaged." "We need to go," Jax said urgently. "They'll have remote monitoring." Nara held up her hand, signaling him to wait. She turned back to the console, fingers flying across the interface. "What are you doing?" Jax asked, keeping watch on the lab entrance. She didn't respond, her focus absolute as she navigated through increasingly restricted sections of the database. Finally, she stepped back, pointing to the screen with grim satisfaction. The display showed a complete project file. Sentinel Program, Phase 3, Empathic Selection Protocol. Images of children, dozens of them, filled the screen, each labeled with designations rather than names. Medical data, genetic modifications, neural programming sequences. "The whole program," Jax breathed. "Evidence of everything they did." Nara nodded, then pointed to a specific file labeled Sentinel Deployment Locations. "We can find the others," Jax realized. "The other children." She nodded again, her expression both hopeful and determined. "Download everything," Jax instructed Maeve. "Every file, every record." "Already in progress, Captain." As the data transferred, Nara moved to one of the preservation tanks, wiping frost from its surface. She beckoned Jax over, pointing inside with evident distress. Within the tank floated what appeared to be a child, or something created to resemble one. Its features were only partially formed, neural implants visible beneath translucent skin. "The next generation," Jax murmured, horror and rage mingling in his voice. "They're still making them." Nara's expression hardened. She moved to another console, initiating a new sequence. Warning messages flashed across the screen. "Stasis termination initiated." "Confirm permanent shutdown." She looked to Jax, questioning. He understood the weight of what she was asking. These weren't living children yet, but incomplete prototypes, suspended in artificial development. Ending the program meant ending their potential existence. "Do it," he said quietly. "No one should be born as a weapon." Nara pressed her palm against the confirmation panel. One by one, the preservation tanks began shutting down, their contents gradually disappearing as the genetic material destabilized. "Download complete," Maeve announced. "But I'm detecting security drones activating throughout the station. We have approximately 4 minutes before they reach our position." "Time to go," Jax said, leading Nara toward the exit. They'd barely reached the corridor when the first shot struck the wall beside them. 3 security drones hovered at the far end of the hallway, weapons trained on their position. "Run!" Jax pushed Nara ahead of him, returning fire to cover their retreat. They raced through the station's winding corridors, the drones in close pursuit. Nara moved with startling agility, instinctively choosing routes that provided cover. Jax followed, impressed despite the danger. "We need to reach the ship," he called to her. "Alternative route through Maintenance Tunnel 7. Nara nodded, veering toward a narrow access panel in the wall. She pried it open with surprising strength, crawling inside without hesitation. Jax followed, pulling the panel closed behind them, just as energy bolts struck the corridor where they'd been standing. The maintenance tunnel was tight, barely large enough for Jax to crawl through on hands and knees. Nara moved ahead confidently, navigating the dark space as if she'd memorized the station's layout. "You've been in these tunnels before," Jax realized, following her lead. She glanced back briefly, nodding once. The implication was clear. These had been escape routes during her time here, ways to temporarily evade her captors. After several minutes of crawling through increasingly narrow passages, they emerged into a familiar corridor, just 2 sections from the docking bay where the Avalon waited. "Straight run from here," Jax said, checking that the way was clear. "Ready?" Nara nodded, determination set in her young face. They sprinted the final distance, the sound of security drones growing louder behind them. As they reached the Avalon's airlock, energy bolts struck around them, scorching the metal walls. "Maeve, initiate emergency departure," Jax called as they tumbled inside. "Departure sequence initiated," the AI responded. "Warning, hostile forces approaching docking clamps." Jax rushed to the cockpit, Nara close behind. Through the viewscreen, they could see more security drones converging on the ship, attempting to override the docking mechanism. "Manual release," Jax muttered, hands flying over the controls. "Hang on!" He slammed the emergency release, simultaneously firing the maneuvering thrusters. The Avalon lurched violently as it tore free from the docking clamps, scraping against the station's structure before breaking clear into open space. "Plot jump coordinates," Jax ordered, evasive maneuvers keeping them just ahead of pursuit fire. "Anywhere outside Coalition space." "Calculating," Maeve responded. "Jump coordinates locked, executing in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into lines as the Avalon entered slipspace, leaving Station 37 and its ghosts behind. In the sudden quiet of normal space, Jax exhaled slowly, turning to find Nara watching him with an unreadable expression. "We made it," he said. "And we have the evidence." She nodded, then reached out hesitantly, her small hand coming to rest on his larger one. A gesture of gratitude, of connection. "What now?" he asked her. "We have the locations of the other children. We could try to find them, help them." Nara considered this, then moved to the navigation display. She pointed to a distant sector, far beyond Coalition jurisdiction, in the autonomous systems of the Outer Reach. "That's a long way," Jax noted. "Beyond normal shipping routes." She nodded, her expression resolute. "But before we go anywhere," Jax continued, "we need to make sure what we found reaches the right people." He pulled up the communications array. "I know someone who can use this information, a journalist who's been investigating YTE for years. If we encrypt the data and send it through multiple relays." Nara watched him work, occasionally pointing to specific files that should be prioritized. Her intuitive understanding of which evidence would be most damning spoke to an intelligence far beyond her years. When the transmission was complete, Jax sat back. "Now we wait. And plan." That evening, as the Avalon drifted in the quiet of deep space, Jax found Nara in the small common area, drawing on a datapad. She'd taken to art with unexpected passion. Once she realized Jax would provide unlimited access to creative tools. He watched silently from the doorway as her small fingers created precise, detailed renderings. The station, the lab, children in various stages of modification, bearing witness through art. "Those might help people understand," Jax said quietly. "If you're willing to share them." Nara looked up, considering this. Then she nodded slowly, offering the pad to him. Jax sat beside her, scrolling through the images. Each one told part of her story, the cages, the tests, the other children. But the final drawing made him pause. A rough sketch of the Avalon, with 2 figures standing together on the bridge. "Is that us?" he asked. Nara nodded, watching his reaction carefully. Jax studied the drawing, noting how she'd depicted him, standing straight, hand extended toward the smaller figure, not restraining, not directing, just offering. "You know," he said after a while. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Eva." Nara's eyes widened slightly at this personal revelation. "She was about your age when she died. On that station." Jax swallowed hard. "There was an accident. At least, that's what they called it. Now I'm not so sure." Nara reached for the datapad, typing quickly. "I'm sorry about Eva." "Thank you," Jax said quietly. "She would have liked you, I think. She was brave, too." Nara considered this, then typed, "Not replacing her." "I know," Jax assured her. "No one could. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for you, too." She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. Finding none, she typed, "Where are we going now?" "Well," Jax said, bringing up the star chart Nara had indicated earlier. "First, we need to send this evidence somewhere safe, then head toward these coordinates you showed me. Unless you have another idea?" Nara shook her head, then added, "Others there, like me, hiding. A sanctuary," Jax realized, "for the ones who escaped." She nodded, her expression brightening with purpose. "Then that's where we'll go," Jax decided. "But first we need to make some modifications to this ship. If we're going to be fugitives, we need better defenses." Nara grinned, eagerness replacing her usual caution. She typed quickly, "I can help. No tech." "I bet you do," Jax smiled. "Engineering assistant it is." Over the following days, as they traveled through remote sectors toward their destination, Jax discovered that Nara's technical knowledge extended far beyond what he'd imagined. She understood ship systems with intuitive brilliance, often anticipating problems before they occurred. The neural collar remained physically attached to her neck. Removal would require specialized medical facilities they didn't yet have access to, but with its control functions disabled, it served only as a reminder of what she'd escaped. Each day, Nara grew more comfortable on the ship. She began speaking occasionally, short, careful sentences that seemed to surprise her as much as Jack's. Her voice, when she chose to use it, was clear and thoughtful. "Captain?" she called him at first, the words spoken with careful precision. "Just Jax is fine," he told her. She considered this, testing the name silently before attempting it aloud. "Jax," she finally said, the single syllable carrying unexpected weight. He smiled. "That's right." They established routines, maintenance checks, navigation calculations, shared meals. Nara's appetite grew as her body recovered from years of deprivation. Her nightmares, though frequent, began to diminish as weeks passed without pursuit. The evidence they'd sent made its way through the relays to Jax's journalist contact. Soon, reports began appearing across independent networks, exposés of the YTE project, testimonies from former employees, calls for investigation. The coalition issued immediate denials, claiming the evidence was fabricated. But the detailed files, combined with Nara's drawings, proved difficult to dismiss. Public outrage grew, particularly in the frontier systems where many of the children had been sourced. "They're calling it the Sentinel scandal," Jax told Nara as they monitored the news feeds. "3 coalition officials have already resigned. YTE's stock is collapsing." Nara nodded with grim satisfaction, though her eyes remained haunted. They both knew exposure wasn't enough, not while other children remained in YTE facilities. As they approached the coordinates Nara had indicated, they encountered increasing security measures, automated scan points, identity verification requests. Each time, Maeve's enhanced countermeasures allowed them to pass undetected. Finally, they reached a small, unremarkable moon orbiting a gas giant in a binary star system. Nothing about it suggested habitation, no visible structures, no energy signatures. "Are you sure this is the place?" Jax asked, scanning the barren surface. Nara nodded confidently, moving to the communications array. With precise movements, she entered a complex sequence, not standard communication protocol, but something unique. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then a response came, not through the comm system, but as a subtle shift in the moon's apparent surface. A camouflage field disengaged, revealing a small but sophisticated outpost nestled within a crater. "Impressive," Jax murmured. A transmission followed, audio only. "Identify purpose." Nara leaned toward the comm, speaking clearly despite her limited vocabulary. Sentinel D9, seeking sanctuary. Silence, then. Verification required. Without hesitation, Nara sang a simple sequence of notes, a melody that seemed somehow familiar, yet alien. The response was immediate. Landing coordinates transmitted. Welcome home, sister. As they guided the Avalon toward the designated landing area, Jax noticed Nara's increasing tension. Her hands trembled slightly. Her breathing quickened. "Are you afraid?" he asked gently. She considered the question, then shook her head. "Not afraid, but different now." Jax understood. "You've changed since you were here last." Nara nodded, touching the dead collar at her neck. "Free now." The Avalon settled onto the landing pad with practiced ease. Through the view screen, they could see figures emerging from the outpost, children and young adolescents, moving with the same careful precision Jax had observed in Nara. Several adults accompanied them, their postures protective rather than controlling. "They're waiting for you," Jax said, preparing to open the airlock. Nara hesitated, then took his hand. "Come with me?" The simple request carried enormous weight. Jax felt something shift within him, the last defensive walls he'd built after losing Eva beginning to crumble. "Of course," he answered, "if you want me to." They descended the Avalon's ramp together, Nara's grip on his hand tightening as they approached the waiting group. A tall woman stepped forward, her bearing suggesting leadership, her eyes assessing Jax with cautious hope. "Welcome to Haven," she said. "I'm Lyra. We've been monitoring the Sentinel scandal reports." Her gaze shifted to Nara. "You're the one who exposed them." Nara nodded once, her chin lifting slightly. "And you?" Lyra asked, turning to Jax. "Former coalition based on your ship's registry." "Former is right," Jax confirmed. "Name's Jax Harrow." Recognition flickered in Lyra's eyes. "The engineer from Vega Station." "The one they blamed?" "The same." Lyra's expression softened slightly. "Then we have much to discuss." She gestured toward the outpost. "Please come inside, both of you." As they followed her, other children approached Nara, some touching her shoulder or arm in silent greeting, others maintaining careful distance. None spoke aloud, but Jax sensed communication happening nonetheless. Subtle expressions, slight gestures, a language developed among those who had learned the value of silence. The outpost itself was remarkable, built largely underground, utilizing the moon's natural cave systems. What had appeared small from above extended deep below the surface, housing what Jax estimated to be 30 or 40 residents. "We established Haven 4 years ago," Lyra explained as she led them through the main living area, after the first Sentinels began escaping. "We provide sanctuary, rehabilitation, and eventually, for those who want it, integration into frontier communities where modified humans are less uncommon." "You were YTE?" Jax asked carefully. "Research Division," Lyra confirmed, her expression hardening. "Until I saw what they were doing to the children, helping them escape cost me everything, but gave me purpose. They reached what appeared to be a medical facility, far more humane than the lab on Station 37, designed with comfort in mind." "We can remove the collar," Lyra told Nara, gesturing to the specialized equipment. "When you're ready." Nara's hand moved instinctively to her neck, hope brightening her eyes. "The procedure takes about an hour," Lyra continued. "Completely painless, I promise." Nara looked to Jax, a question in her gaze. "It's your choice," he told her. "I'll be right here if you want me to stay." She nodded decisively, then spoke, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I want it gone." "Then we help others." "We?" Lyra questioned, looking between them. "We," Jax confirmed, the decision crystallizing in his mind. "The Avalon can reach places your ground facility can't, and we have the locations of every current YTE holding facility." Understanding dawned in Lyra's eyes. "You're proposing a rescue operation." "More than that," Jax said. "A reckoning." That evening, as Nara underwent the procedure to remove her collar, Jax sat with Lyra and the other Haven leaders, planning the first phase of what would become a coordinated liberation effort. The evidence they'd released had created the perfect distraction. YTE facilities were facing inspections, executives were being questioned, security was distracted. "We'll start with the most vulnerable," Lyra decided, marking locations on the star chart. "The youngest sentinels, the newest acquisitions." "The Avalon can reach the outer facilities within 2 weeks," Jax noted. "With modifications, we can transport up to 15 at a time." As they finalized details, a medical technician appeared at the door. "She's asking for you, Jax." He found Nara in the recovery room, sitting upright on the examination table. The collar was gone, replaced by a thin line of regenerated skin, nearly invisible thanks to her enhanced healing. She looked different somehow, unburdened, her posture straighter, her eyes clearer. "How do you feel?" Jax asked. Nara touched her neck, a smile spreading across her face. "Whole," she said simply. Then, with evident pride in her growing vocabulary, "Thank you for helping me." "You helped yourself," Jax replied. "I just provided transportation." She shook her head, disagreeing with his modesty. "You chose, when others didn't." The simple truth of it settled between them. He had made a choice that day on Oris Prime, to see a child where others saw only a weapon or a commodity, and that choice had changed everything. "We're planning the rescue operations," Jax told her. "If you want to be involved." "I do," she said firmly. "I know what they need, what to say." Jax nodded, understanding. Who better to reach traumatized children than one who had survived the same experience? "Then we'll do it together," he promised. 3 months later, the Avalon approached Oris Prime once more, its exterior modified, its registry altered, but its mission unchanged. In the co-pilot's seat sat Nara, her dark hair now neatly trimmed, her frame slightly filled out from proper nutrition. The neural collar was gone, though she sometimes still touched her neck unconsciously, remembering its weight. "Transport Authority requesting identification," Maeve announced. "Send the fabricated credentials," Jax instructed. "Merchant vessel Solaris, medical supplies for Sector 7. As they docked, Nara's expression remained calm, despite returning to where her journey had begun. In the 3 months since finding Haven, she had participated in 6 successful rescue operations, helping 23 Sentinel children find freedom. Her ability to connect with them, to communicate in ways the adults couldn't, had proven invaluable. "Ready?" Jax asked as they prepared to disembark. Nara nodded, determination evident in her posture. "Always." Together they moved through the familiar corridors of Oris Prime, their false identification badges granting access to restricted areas. The station had changed little, still a hub of commerce and transit, still willfully ignorant of what passed through its cargo bays. They reached their destination, a secure holding area where, according to their intelligence, 3 Sentinel children awaited transport to a YTE retraining facility. The guard barely glanced at their credentials before granting access. Inside, they found exactly what they expected. 3 small figures in separate containment units, each bearing the familiar neural collar, each watching with the hyper-vigilant awareness Jax had come to recognize. Nara approached the first unit, making direct eye contact with the child inside, a boy no older than 7. She pressed her hand to the glass, then spoke clearly. "We're taking you home. To others like us." The boy's eyes widened slightly, hope and suspicion warring in his expression. "We need to move quickly," Jax said, overriding the containment controls with the specialized device Haven's technicians had developed. "Transport leaves in 20 minutes. Working efficiently, they released each child, Nara speaking quiet reassurances as Jax disabled the tracking functions in their collars. None of the children spoke, but they followed Nara's lead without resistance, recognizing something in her that they trusted. The return to the Avalon proceeded without incident, another successful extraction added to their growing list. As they prepared for departure, Maeve reported an incoming transmission. "It's Lyra," the AI announced. "Priority message." Lyra's voice filled the cockpit. "Operation completed on Helios 9. All targets secured. The coalition is officially launching an investigation into YTE. The evidence couldn't be ignored any longer. We're making progress, Jax. Good news, he acknowledged. We've secured 3 more. Heading back to Haven now. Safe travels, Lyra responded. And thank you, both of you. As the transmission ended, Jax noticed Nara watching him with a contemplative expression. What? He asked. Home, she said thoughtfully. Is Haven home now? Jax considered the question. It can be if you want it to be. It's a good place. Nara shook her head slightly. No. The Avalon is home. The simple declaration caught Jax off guard, touching something deep within him, a place he'd thought permanently closed after Eva's death. The realization that somewhere along the way, this ship had become more than transportation. It had become family. Yes, he agreed quietly. I suppose it is. Months became a year. The coordinated efforts of Haven, combined with the growing public outcry, forced significant changes. YTE facilities were shut down one by one, their executives facing criminal charges, their research confiscated. The Sentinel children were located, freed, and brought to Haven or similar sanctuaries that had emerged across the frontier systems. The Avalon continued its missions, becoming something of a legend among those in need, the ship that appeared when hope seemed lost, crewed by a quiet man and a perceptive girl who could tell truth from lies with a single glance. Nara grew, not just physically, but in confidence and voice. Her vocabulary expanded daily, her technical skills rivaling Jax's own. She became not just crew, but partner in their ongoing work. The neural collar remained a memory, the thin scar on her neck fading with time. But the ability to sense deception, that remained, a gift when used by choice rather than compulsion. 2 years after their first meeting on Orus Prime, the Avalon docked at a small frontier outpost, one of many stops on their regular circuit, providing technical assistance to communities beyond Coalition reach. Jax and Nara worked side by side, repairing critical systems, trading services for supplies. As they prepared to depart, a local administrator approached them cautiously. We've heard stories, the woman said, about what you did during the Sentinel crisis, about the children you saved. Jax tensed slightly, but Nara placed a reassuring hand on his arm. The stories are true, she replied, her voice clear and confident. But that chapter is closing. The administrator nodded respectfully. Well, just know that you'll always find safe harbor here, both of you. As they returned to the Avalon, Maeve greeted them with characteristic dryness. Another admirer. Your reputation continues to grow, despite my best efforts to maintain a low profile. Your concern is noted, Jax replied with the hint of a smile. She bit the last 3 passengers, Maeve continued, artificial sighing. I don't know why I even bother with security protocols. Yeah, Jax said, glancing at Nara with quiet pride as he extended his hand toward her. But she never bites home. Nara took his offered hand without hesitation, her grip steady and sure. Never, she agreed, the single word carrying the weight of a promise kept, of trust earned, of a journey neither had expected, but both had chosen. Together they moved toward the cockpit, toward the next destination, the next mission. The Avalon hummed around them, not just a ship, but a sanctuary of their own making. A place where choices mattered, where truth was valued, where healing happened in the spaces between words. And as they set course for the stars, Nara didn't look back at what had been, but forward to what could be. She had been designed as a weapon, labeled as defective, but had emerged as something entirely different, herself, defined not by others' intentions, but by her own choices. Just as Jax had been defined not by his losses, but by his decision to extend his hand when others would have turned away. The stars stretched before them, endless possibilities in their light.